Hello, and welcome back to the Global Intelligence Knowledge Network Intelligence Wrap-Up for the week of 2024, May 3rd. I'm your host, Neil Bisson, a retired intelligence officer with the Canadian Security Intelligence Service and the director of Global Intelligence Knowledge Network. Each week, I discuss the headlines and news articles that focus on national security, espionage, and foreign interference. Today, we're diving into recent headlines and news stories concerning foreign interference in Canada and the other Five Eyes countries, developments in the assassination plots of Canadian and American Sikh activists, and changes in legislation that has a significant implication for telecommunication security and geopolitical dynamics. So without further delay, let's get into it. Today's first story deals with a particularly troubling article that sheds new light on the allegations of misconduct within the Canadian Security Intelligence Service. According to the news article, the investigation of the activities of surveillance shows significant disparity in interpretations regarding between what the surveillant described as multiple sexual assaults and what the internal investigation described as a romantic relationship. I will repeat what I've said previously about this story. I have absolutely no idea whether or not there is any truth to the allegations made by the surveillant against her superior. However, as someone who has worked in the intelligence community for over 20 years, this case is deeply troubling, and it raises serious questions about the handling of such sensitive matters within the service. I can only imagine the pain and resentment felt by anyone who has had to deal with such a situation in their life. But what also needs to be addressed here and understood is that under the Security of Information Act, this individual is also permanently bound to secrecy, as well as special operational information restrictions. What does that mean? Well, this includes everyone and every aspect of what has transpired during work hours of her alleged assaults and anyone who is involved and also similarly bound to secrecy. As such, this places the individuals and the organization in a situation where particulars surrounding the allegations fall within that boundary of secrecy, or being bound to secrecy conundrum. Given this problem, it is not surprising that the service conducted an internal investigation for more fact-finding. But as most Canadians in their personal and professional lives would agree, an accusation of sexual assault is typically and understandably a criminal investigation. This, unfortunately, is not the first time that such allegations have come to light in Canadian federal departments like the RCMP or the Canadian Armed Forces. I believe that most would agree that despite the importance of ensuring that the foundation of the Security of Information Act are maintained, a lack of transparency surrounding this investigation and its findings is alarming, especially considering the potential impact on the individuals involved, their well-being and career, not to mention the reputation of the service. Moving forward, I fully intend to continue to closely monitor news relating to this story, and I hope that the values of the Canadian intelligence community are maintained so that we can continue to trust these institutions. I would also like to remind the listeners that the actions of individuals who participate in criminal behavior is not necessarily a reflection of the government departments that they work for, and that while the SOIA is an added layer of complexity to this case, it does not equate to a lack of transparency in the findings of what actually happened or who should be charged criminally. Revelations came to light this week concerning Chinese email hacking after Conservative MP Garnet Jinhui raised a question of privilege in the House of Commons. Jinhui expressed dismay over the Canadian government's failure to disclose parliamentarians who were in the crosshairs of Beijing-linked hackers. Jinhui, along with his colleagues Liberal MP John McKay, were informed last week about a cyber attack launched against them and 16 other Canadian parliamentarians in 2021. The attack targeted members of the Inter-Parliamentarian Alliance on China, an international group advocating for reform and on how democratic countries can engage with China. The Canadian MPs learned about the coordinated attacks through an unsealed U.S. Department of Justice indictment in March, which implicated China's state-backed hacking group, ATP-31. This revelation has raised some serious concerns about the security of parliamentary communications and the potential for foreign interference in Canadian affairs. What's particularly alarming is the apparent lack of communication from Canada's security officials, leaving MPs in the dark about the threat they faced. Genuine emphasized the importance of being informed promptly, especially given the progressive nature of the attack. Among the impacted parliamentarians were Conservative MPs James Bisson, Stephanie Coucy, and Tom Kimiek, as well as Liberal MP Judy Escrow and non-affiliated Senator Mary-Lou McPhedran. The failure to notify them has been condemned as a serious breach of parliamentary privilege. Liberal MP Judy Escrow echoed these sentiments, emphasizing the need for MPs to be able to speak without fear of intimidation or hacking. She called for answers from the government regarding why parliamentarians were kept in the dark and how they can better protect themselves in the future. The government has acknowledged the seriousness of foreign interference, but claims to be taking action to protect Canada's democracy and institutions. However, the lack of transparency regarding the handling of the cyber attack has left many unanswered questions. Meanwhile, the Canadian Security Intelligence Service and the Communication Security Establishment have been urged to provide more information to parliamentarians under threat. This incident underscores the importance of robust cybersecurity measures and transparent communications to mitigate the risk posed by foreign interference. As this debate unfolds in the House of Commons and calls for further investigations grow louder, one thing is clear. The need for transparency, accountability, and robust cybersecurity measures has never been more pressing. Sticking with Chinese hacking, a recent story about the Federal Communications Commission is making moves to bar Huawei, ZTE, and other Chinese telecommunication companies from certifying wireless equipment in the United States. This decision comes amidst ongoing concerns about national security risks posed by foreign entities in the telecommunications sector. The FCC's proposal, set for a vote this month, aims to permanently prohibit companies like Huawei from participating in the Equipment Authorization Program, citing persistent security threats and supply chain vulnerabilities. This move follows previous actions by the FCC, including the banning of approvals for new telecommunications equipment from Huawei and ZTE in November of 2022. It is unknown at this point if the Canadian government will follow suit in regard to banning Chinese companies like Huawei and ZTE. But given Canada's issues in the past with Huawei's executives and the two Michaels, let's hope for the sake of Canadian critical infrastructure, as well as our commitments to our Five Eyes partners and other Western intelligence agencies, that we follow suit with the American government on this one. Moving on to another story, but sticking with what's happening in the world of intelligence and law enforcement in Canada, the next news article revolves around a retired RCMP officer charged with aiding China in foreign interference. William Matcher, 61, is currently facing charges under the Security of Information Act for conspiracy and committing preparatory acts for the benefit of a foreign entity. Matcher's legal team argued this week that the indictment against him should have been filed in British Columbia or Ontario, where the alleged offenses are said to have taken place. The defense asserts that there's no connection between the case and the province of Quebec where the charges were filed. Now, this raises an interesting legal question. Should the prosecution be initiated in a jurisdiction with a specific connection to the crime, the offense, or the offender? Matcher's lawyers seem to think so. While the Crown contends that any jurisdiction in Canada is appropriate for cases involving the Security of Information Act. It's worth noting that Matcher, a former RCMP officer, later worked in investment banking in Hong Kong, where he co-founded a company focusing on money laundering and financial crime risk. The case against him was mounted by federal prosecutors in Quebec following an investigation by the Quebec branch of the RCMP's Integrated National Security Enforcement Team. From my perspective, as with similar cases of individuals being prosecuted under the SOIA, Matcher's lawyers are essentially trying to call anything they can into disrepute to undermine the real issue of the case. I've previously written about this and about Matcher's case on my website. and an article entitled When Plausible Deniability Isn't Plausible or Deniable. I highly recommend you check it out at www.globalintelligenceknowledgenetwork.com for a review of the arrest, the allegations, and the operations that Matcher was involved in. As we await the ruling of Matcher's request to quash the charges, it's clear that this case underscores some of the complexities of prosecuting individuals involved in matters of national security and foreign interference. This is another story I'll be watching closely and keeping you appraised of. Sticking with RCMP issues and concerns, this week a recent report from the Mounties Independent Advisory Board paints a grim picture. It suggests that the RCMP's federal wing, responsible for investigating complex criminal threats like foreign interference, terrorism, and financial crime, is at a critical juncture. Budget and personnel shortfalls have left the RCMP operationally limited, hindering its ability to tackle key cases annually. But the implications go beyond just operational limitations. The report warns that Canada's credibility on the global stage is at risk due to the weakening capacity of federal policing. As the RCMP represents Canada and globally secure bodies like Five Eyes Intelligence Alliance and Interpol, any erosion of its capabilities undermines Canada's standing in international politics. The root of the problem seems to stem from a combination of government cost-cutting measures and recruitment challenges. Reduced funding and difficulties in recruiting and retaining skilled personnel have left the RCMP struggling to keep up with evolving threats, particularly in areas like cybercrime and transnational organized crime. While the report offers several recommendations to address these challenges, including specialized training for investigators and obtaining special allowances for higher salaries, the onus ultimately on the federal government to prioritize the safety and security of Canadians is paramount. This is yet another case of a lack of dedicated attention from the government on these critical issues. Competing priorities and electoral considerations continue to overshadow the needs for meaningful change in national law enforcement and national security concerns. Despite the challenges ahead, Deputy Commissioner Mark Flynn of the RCMP's Federal Policing Unit remains optimistic. He acknowledges the importance of the report's findings in strengthening and organizing and is committed to implementing necessary changes. As elections move closer, I hope to see that the concerns addressed by the various political parties and demonstrated to voting Canadians reflect that the potential government has an understanding and concern for the importance of national security in Canada. Okay, let's switch gears here and begin to focus on the global aspects of global intelligence. Let's start by looking at the recent events unfolding in Germany, specifically in regards to the ever-present threat of foreign adversaries or spies. Multiple news stories this week have shown that there is a surge in spying threats from Russia and China in Germany, which has rattled the nation's political landscape. In the past month alone, 6 suspected spies have been apprehended, revealing a complex web of espionage activities. From allegations of Russian interference in military affairs to Chinese attempts to access advanced technology, these incidents underscore the multifaceted nature of modern espionage. Notably, even high-profile political figures have found themselves embroiled in allegations of espionage, emphasizing the pervasive reach of foreign intelligence services. What we can learn from analytical perspective from Germany's experience? First and foremost, there is an ever-growing need for heightened vigilance against foreign interference, which can't be overstated. As we've seen in Canada, recent public inquiry into foreign interference in federal elections, hostile actors are actively seeking to undermine democratic processes in almost every country who has a democratic process. So, what are some of the key takeaways for Western intelligence communities? It's clear that well-funded and robust intelligence apparatus is paramount in identifying and neutralizing foreign spies before they can inflict further harm. The recent crackdowns in Germany serve as a wake-up call, urging us to bolster Canada's own counter-espionage capabilities. Moreover, fostering international cooperation is crucial in combating the transnational nature of modern espionage. By sharing intelligence and best practices, we can strengthen our collective defenses against covert infiltration and safeguard the integrity of our democratic institutions. Sticking with the topic of foreign interference, a report that came in the Washington Post, which details how an Indian intelligence official from the Research and Analysis Wing, or RAW, was allegedly involved in the assassination plot targeting Sikh separatist leader Gurpatwant Singh Pannoon in the U.S. The RAW officer was identified as Vikram Yadav, and according to the Post article, his decision to assassinate Pannoon was approved by the then Indian spy agency chief, Samant Goel. Now, this revelation has raised a multitude of questions, not just about the specifics of this case, but also about the broader implications of international security. How does this alleged involvement of a RAW official in a cross-border assassination plot impact diplomatic relations and intelligence sharing agreements between countries? And what does it say about the extent to which intelligence agencies are willing to go to eliminate perceived threats? The case becomes even more complex as a higher-ranking RAW official has been implicated, with potential leaks to Prime Minister Narendra Modi's inner circle. As we navigate through these murky waters, it's essential to analyze the motives and objectives behind such actions, and to determine the potential consequences for global stability. As I previously detailed, the alleged plot to assassinate Pannoon in the U.S. coincided with the fatal shooting of a Sikh activist, Hardeep Singh Nijjar, in British Columbia in June of last year. The connection between these incidences underscores the transnational nature of modern-day threats and the need for enhanced cooperation between intelligence agencies on a global scale. As the investigation unfolds, it's crucial to keep a close eye on how various governments respond to these allegations. What's the next question? Will there be any diplomatic repercussions? The investigation, spearheaded by the CIA, FBI, and other agencies, is said to be sprawling, potentially reaching into the inner circles of Prime Minister Modi's administration. Surprisingly, there's been no indications in the news on whether CSIS or the RCMP have made further discoveries in the case of Nijjar, or the implication of Vikram Yadav. I would not be surprised if Yadav has some connections to Canada, either through travel or contacts. Will there be calls for accountability and justice? It does appear that senior U.S. officials are pushing for Yadav's prosecution, a move that could implicate RAW in a murder-for-hire conspiracy. However, the indictment, while implicating an Indian official, notably refrains from directly naming RAW. In intelligence terms, this is considered to be blowback, when an operation by an intelligence organization is discovered and has repercussions for the government of that organization. If you think Canada and the United States are the only countries sounding the alarm on the shenanigans of the Research and Analysis Wing, well, you're wrong. This week, the Australian Broadcasting Company provided reporting which shed light on Australia's confrontation with foreign espionage. The report focused on concerning revelations about the expulsion of 2 Indian intelligence operatives in 2020. The incident, while shrouded in secrecy, underscores the ongoing battle against foreign interference in Australian affairs. According to reports, Australia's domestic intelligence agency, ASIO, uncovered what it described as a nest of spies from an unnamed country, engaged in activities ranging from cultivating relationships with politicians to obtaining classified trade information. The revelation, though alarming, reflects Australia's commitment to safeguarding its sovereignty and national security. The details are intriguing. The Washington Post disclosed that 2 officers from India's Research and Analysis Wing were expelled from Australia in 2020 amidst a series of clashes between RAW and Western domestic security services. The incident sheds light on the global dimensions of espionage and the challenges faced by democracies in countering foreign interference. However, the timing of these revelations is noteworthy. Just weeks ago, Australia released its National Defence Strategy, emphasizing India as a top-tier security partner. The juxtaposition highlights the complexities of diplomatic relationships in the face of these security challenges. As tensions simmer, both nations navigate the delicate balance between cooperation and vigilance. While India remains a close partner of Australia, recent developments underscore the need for robust measures to counter foreign interference and uphold their national sovereignty. Does this sound familiar? Well, it should. Okay, let's switch our focus to a recent report by Article 19, a human rights watchdog, shedding light on China's ambitions and their endeavor to export its model of digital authoritarianism worldwide. In the article entitled China Trying to Develop World Built on Censorship and Surveillance, the news article warns of China's concentrated efforts to reshape global internet governance norms, promoting a digital ecosystem founded on censorship and surveillance. Let's break this down. Since 2015, China has been advancing its Digital Silk Road initiative alongside its Belt and Road project, extending its influence through digital infrastructure projects across the globe. From submarine cables to 5G connectivity, China's tech industry serves as a key player, acting as proxies for the Communist Chinese Party. The report highlights the alarming trend of countries, including Cambodia, Malaysia, and Vietnam, that are adopting elements of China's digital governance model. These efforts, such as the construction of national internet gateways akin to China's Great Firewall, pose significant risks to free expression and privacy rights. But the implications extend far beyond national borders. China's growing influence in tech companies blurs the line between state and private sector, raising concerns about data privacy, censorship, and potential influence campaigns abroad. This has led to security concerns in democracies worldwide, prompting actions such as banning Chinese-owned apps and restricting the involvement of Chinese tech firms in critical infrastructure projects. As a former intelligence officer, I recognize the multifaceted nature of these challenges. From the geopolitical ramifications to the implications for global security, the rise of digital authoritarianism demands a coordinated response rooted in transparency, oversight, and respect for fundamental rights. Well, that should do it for this week. As always, thanks for taking the time to improve your intelligence by listening to the Global Intelligence Knowledge Network Weekly Wrap-Up. If you enjoyed this podcast, please take the time to leave a comment, a like, or share it with someone you feel would also enjoy it. I'm Neil Bisson, the Director of Global Intelligence Knowledge Network. And further to this podcast, I also do a weekly podcast with former intelligence officers Al Tredenick and former intelligence analyst Phil Gursky. Al, Phil, and myself provide insights into what's happening in regards to national security matters with the podcast Spies Like Us. So as with Global Intelligence Knowledge Network Weekly Wrap-Up, you can ask for Spies Like Us on your smart speaker or find us on Spotify or Apple Podcast. So until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe.